Why don't we want to live in Sweden? So now that we're doing our home search around the world, a lot of you guys have been asking us, why don't you just stay in Sweden? What's wrong with Sweden? And today we wanted to address that question once and for all.
Everything that's wrong with Sweden. No. If you haven't seen us before, we're Oskar and Dan. We're looking for somewhere around the world to live. We both grew up sort of in Sweden. Oskar spent his whole childhood there.
Yep.
I lived there from 9 to 19. So although now that we're almost 30 in a few years, that's not a huge portion of my life. I still feel very Swedish because those are very formative years.
Yeah.
The question everyone wants to know is, why don't we just settle down in Sweden? Our families are there. It would make life so easy.
Yeah.
We know what it's like. We could integrate well. We have friends there.
Yeah.
But still, we absolutely do not want to live in Sweden if we have a choice.
Today we're going to get into all those reasons why, and to just give some context here, for the past 10 years basically that we've been together, we have lived a very nomadic lifestyle. So we've been traveling either full-time or living abroad in different places, either for university or independently, and that has kind of messed us up in many ways, you could say. So although we do feel Swedish in our core, we aren't necessarily that Swedish anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we should preface this by saying that I always wanted to leave Sweden. From the moment I moved there, I realized I don't want to live here.
At 9 years old.
Yeah, basically. At 10, I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. We want to start by talking about the things we love about Sweden, because there are many things we love and we really treasure.
And some things we love even more, having spent so much time outside of Sweden, things that we have perspective on now.
I think for me, the main thing is the people and their values.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the social situation, just the fact that people in Sweden really value taking care of everyone in the country. For example, during the refugee crisis in the mid-2010s, the general attitude was, we want to help. We want to help people in need, and I think that's really beautiful.
And I think a lot of countries or a lot of cultures preach equality and this and this and that, but like in Sweden, it really is an internalized part of culture. Like we really believe everyone is the same, everyone is equal, everyone deserves the same rights, and that is something beautiful that you don't really find in most places. Actually.
Especially right now with how the world is going, I still feel that although Sweden is also kind of affected by that, it's still so much better than most of the world. And that sort of ties into another thing we really appreciate, which is that there's so much trust from us, from all of society, toward politicians, toward any elected official, or anyone in any job. The level of corruption in Sweden is truly one of the lowest in the world. It makes us so delusional about the rest of the world.
Right. That's the thing, as like a Swedish traveler, you're so gullible so much of the time because like you believe that everyone around you has the best of intentions always, because that's how we grew up thinking about other people, you know?
Thank you, Swedish politicians in Sweden, for being just a very trustworthy place where people do their job and don't just think selfishly.
Yeah. Exactly. Another thing that we value a lot now as we're getting older as well is work-life balance, and how like that is really like a pillar of Swedish life.
People have a very healthy attitude about it. People take vacations a lot, which I think is good from the perspective of when you're healthy, yes, it's good to work and contribute, but people can get sick at any time or have a kid, then having the option to, you know, not work and not be punished by society, I think is good in most circumstances. And of course, the maternity and paternity leave is awesome.
Yeah, and that brings us to another point, which is that it's relatively very, very cheap to raise kids in Sweden, at least from our perception.
Which Swedes are going to be like, what are you doing?
I know, and hold on, but like compared to what it's like in other countries, like when you talk to people in other countries, I mean, I'm not just talking about like the US in this case, like pretty much anywhere around the world, like when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, like childcare, that kind of stuff, like it is a huge expense, and it's something that people now, especially with the cost of living crisis and everything, think about even more than ever. But in Sweden, like I think people don't really quite realize how good they have it. You get a child allowance every month. You get so many things paid for.
Meals at daycare, I mean all this stuff.
Yeah, and you even get university paid for as well. So it's like you do get a lot of things, right, that I think Swedes don't really treasure as much as they should.
I think honestly my favorite thing about Sweden is how healthy and clean everything is, from the air to the water most of the year to food at the grocery stores. We're so spoiled.
So spoiled.
To have all the conditions for good physical health, maybe not so much mental health, which we'll get to, but when you land and you step off a plane in Sweden,
it's like wearing an oxygen mask.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels amazing. The air smells amazing.
Yeah.
We go swimming in lakes all the time. Swedes are so lucky for that. And also, you buy vegetables at the grocery store and you know that compared to many other parts of the world as well, it's quite healthy and clean. So you're not just eating stuff that is, I don't know, making you sicker.
This is a non-exhaustive list of other things we love about Sweden, but those are just some of the top things.
Yeah, and of course we love that our family and friends live there, but if we could choose, we would probably also move them somewhere else with us.
Yeah, so now we're gonna get into some of the things that we like less about Sweden. And a lot of these things, just to preface, are personal things. It's nothing universal or anything like that. It's just our personal preference.
It's also how they affect us. We have friends who are basically not affected by it at all because they're those types of people. But for us, the type of people we are, these things kind of bother us. And the first thing, the thing that has made me want to move since I was like 12, that exists in so many countries, but we have a specific name for it in Sweden and in the Nordics. It's called jantelagen in Sweden. In many other English-speaking countries, it's basically like tall poppy syndrome. I cannot stand this. There is nothing worse than people who are bitter and not happy about other people's success. I cannot fathom the idea of seeing someone you know, especially a family member, succeed and not be overwhelmingly happy for them. When I think of my cousin, for example, one of my cousins in the US who's been very successful, it fills me with so much pride and joy, and I just want to celebrate him. And to think that underlying Swedish culture to us is this constant resentment of anyone who does anything outside the norm and is successful, I just cannot. I cannot. You feel it everywhere. You feel it in small snide comments. You feel it in looks. And even if people say, no, it's no big deal, or they say they're happy for you, you can tell. You
know, we can all celebrate each other for what we're doing. You know, it doesn't have to be a one-way street in any way.
And it's the same with other people. When I want to ask questions about amazing things they're doing or trips they've taken and stuff, it's like, no, I don't want to talk about me. I'm not special. And it's like, yes, every person is unique and special, and I want to hear what you have to say. But anyway, I could rant about this for a long time, but it's a huge...
If you couldn't tell that already.
It's a huge cultural irritation for me.
It exists in many places around the world, so that also...
Most places.
It's a bit of a factor when we decide where we want to settle down as well.
The thing is, the reason we could potentially move somewhere else and the two of us wouldn't be affected is that when you don't live in your home culture, you kind of have a shield against that.
You're an exception.
You're removed from it.
Exactly.
So we love traveling to Japan and Korea, but we know that the expectations to fit in and not do anything different and stuff are so much stronger there even. But we just are very aware of the fact that we're not impacted by that when we're there or when we're around Koreans or even if we moved there because they see us as separate.
Okay, moving on to another thing that is kind of obvious, but it's the weather. It's so funny when we're with our Swedish families or whatever because you kind of get weather amnesia is what I like to call it. For most of the year, it's literally some of the worst weather I could possibly imagine.
On planet Earth.
Like gray,
in southern Sweden.
Dark, overcast, spitting rain, like not fully raining, so it's like kind of indecisive weather, right? You could literally be that for several months without any sun at all. Like usually in November, there's like no sunny days in Gothenburg at least. But then as soon as the sun comes out, everyone forgets about that entire period of time.
And I don't think the problem is seasons or winter. It's just the fact that our families are from Gothenburg. There, you don't have a real winter. You just have summer and then like 8 months of miserable, dreary weather.
Yeah, and for people who are not from like a northern or very southern place, like the changes in seasons and how dark and light it gets during summer and winter, like until you've lived through it, like do not underestimate it. Like it's crazy how much it can get to you when it's dark, so dark for 4 or 5 months of the year.
Sunrise at 9 a.m., sunset at 3 p.m. And during those 6 hours when it's light, the clouds are super low and thick. So it's basically like the equivalent of midnight there in the summer when it's super light and amazing. So
exactly. I think we get more affected by it than many other people, but that's just a really important thing for us. Like we want to be in better weather.
Once you've experienced living in good weather, it's hard to go back.
Exactly. Okay, so the flip side to the great focus on equality, which I think is so incredibly noble and everything, I think sometimes that turns into a bit of a repressive, conformist element in Swedish culture which is kind of interesting, where whatever makes you unique, don't let that shine too much, because we're all supposed to be the same.
So to give an example, which people are going to be so upset and disagree with it, but it is 100% true, is that although Sweden on paper is so LGBT friendly, for example, and society in general is very accepting, which is so amazing and we so appreciate it, because of this extreme conformist culture, there are still so many people who don't dare to come out because they don't want to be seen as different in any way. And even if they do come out, they have to be exactly like everyone else still. They can't like any different shows or have any kind of subculture, because that's not acceptable. If you've lived in a big city like New York or London or LA or San Francisco, I'm sure it's like this in many places.
Yeah, of course. But like the way we know that this is true as well is that like people we talk to in Sweden, like our family or whatever, they don't know any LGBTQ plus people at all. And they're like usually shocked by it almost themselves, like why don't I know anyone? And it's like, well, yeah, it's because people don't feel comfortable coming out. Although it's like super accepting on paper, it doesn't really translate into the culture that is so conformist.
From a personal point of view, I think another challenge about Sweden is that for us to ever integrate back into society would be almost impossible, because now we've sort of left the boundaries of what is considered normal to a Swede. Making friends for any Swede is very, very difficult after school age. So if we were to move somewhere even an hour away from our family and the few friends we have who still live in Gothenburg, for example, it would be impossible pretty much to make friends. Everyone hangs out with their high school friends, their middle school, or even preschool friends. Very few people hang out with colleagues. Very few people will meet someone at a restaurant or in any social setting and make new friends that way, which is very unfortunate. Even in Sweden's second biggest city, I assume it's the same in Stockholm based on what our friends tell us. But because of that, the idea of us being able to create the same type of life there that we can create elsewhere just seems very unlikely. And I think that all these factors combine to make it just not the most attractive option, considering all the other options we have even in Europe. Because if we're not going to live driving distance from our family, and driving distance in Sweden is like tops an hour, any more than that people
well, in southern Sweden. In northern Sweden it's different because everything's spread out, but
like if we lived more than an hour away, we would never see anyone. So at that point it's like, well, then we might as well just live 10 hours away. Like it doesn't make a difference in how often we'll see someone.
Exactly.
So then we might as well live elsewhere in Europe or even further away. And I keep telling my family, can you at least please, some of you, move to southern Sweden, to the very south, close to Copenhagen. So you're close to a big airport. I find the southern part of Sweden, Skåne, to be the best
nicest part. We love it there.
Like if we were to live in Sweden, we would live there.
For sure. I think this kind of applies to anyone who's traveled a lot or lived abroad for a long time. Like you kind of become like shaped by all your experiences, right, throughout life. And then it's just impossible to fit inside the whole of your home country when you come back after so much time. So I think that's just a general point that we're experiencing.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, we love most things about Sweden on paper.
Yeah, we do.
I think in reality, just us being there, it doesn't feel right. There's too many things that grate at our happiness, at our patience. Sweden can be right for so many people, and we totally understand why some of our friends and family choose to stay, because they are not bothered by the same things that bother us.
Exactly, and we love what Sweden represents in the world, and we hope that it stays the type of country that it has been for decades and decades and decades, because we wanted to provide that example. And we think that's really important. So don't change, Sweden.
But also no, I'm kidding.
I mean, there's always things you want to change about your home country, but I think in the end, it's good that we're all different and everyone can choose what they like.
Hejdå, tack för idag.
Anyway, we are recording this video from the next place that we're evaluating as a place to call home as well. So hint, hint, coming up in the next video if you want to check that out. If you have any questions or comments or your own thoughts on this topic, either on Sweden or just living abroad in general and then not fitting in at home anymore, leave them down below. And as always, until we see you in the next one, see you around the world.